Welcome, folks, to Eye on the Illini. We were able to get everybody together here for a podcast later on in the evening. We appreciate folks' patience. Brad, we had a game that I don't know. Maybe I'm too old school, but if you get a win on the road in the Big Ten, I'm usually happy, no matter how artistic or lack of artistic it is. Sure, I'd prefer to beat every team by 32, but I like getting a W. And look, there were plenty of opportunities for this team to fold down the stretch, and they didn't.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing. A lot of people you want it to be pretty. You want them to look like they're, world beaters all the time. But the reality is they got it. They got it done. They made the plays they had to make down the stretch. They, did a great job on the glass. They scored 81 points in this game, despite the fact that they shot 5 for 26 from 3-point range. That's hard to do. And they didn't even shoot free throws very well. They made the last 4 there, but they missed some front ends. They missed, Boswell missed 2 in a row one time. I missed a front end. They had a lot of misses that would have given them. They also missed. Ivasic, how many little bunnies did he miss? Little 2-foot hook shots in front of the rim. Just there were so many opportunities, and then they turned the ball over early a lot, and they still, scored 81 points. I think one thing that really stood out to me was they had one turnover. Obviously, we remember what it was on the inbounds play in the last 14 minutes, 14:50, I think it was. They had one turnover in the last 14:50. They finally got shots. They started scoring. They couldn't get stops. Washington, give them credit. They hit some shots. But at the end of the day, you anytime you get a win on the road in the Big Ten, that's a positive. And they got the win. They win it. And they, go 2-0 in this West Coast swing. I don't think there are many teams. Maryland right now would love to be 2-0 on the West Coast swing. They went 0-2. So you get road wins. This travel too. This is a new thing. And I know people said it wouldn't matter, but didn't you think that Illinois' legs looked dead in the last 10 minutes of the game? I think a lot of that's being out there for 6 days as they travel to the West Coast.
Being out there for 6 days, like you mentioned, Brad, playing as hard as well as they did against Oregon, all that really matters. It does. And when you take a step back and look at the big picture, you're right. They've scored 81 points today, and they missed a couple of bunnies. The one guy we talked about was Ivasic. He missed a ton of layups, and those are gimmies for him. So he knocks down a couple of those. He may put up 100 points again. Not just him. And then you mentioned the free throws. So it's, and Washington was at home. It took a career performance from a guy off the bench, for them to even have a chance in the game. It was over, to be honest with you, but Illinois was able to gut it out. They were able to withstand Davis's outstanding performance. And if you really look at it, he along with Courtwright were the only guys in double figures. So in Illinois, I believe, had three guys in double figures, and Gibbs Longhorn, he had 8. So, it's a road win. Mike, to answer your question, it's a road win. I don't care. Going into the game, I just say, give me a 1-point win and walk out. It doesn't matter at the end of the day, because you know what? They're going to be tough to come by. In Washington, beat Maryland at home, and they're going to get some other teams at home as well.
Yeah, I think one thing that Brad said, I think is huge. It seems like this team is starting to value the possession a little more. And so you had one turnover down the stretch. They play like that against Northwestern. That's one less loss. And you can argue that with Tennessee, if they had that lack of turnovers, they might have won that game. I think this is an important discussion point that people aren't talking about, because if they had a 10 turnover, second half, they might not have come out on top in this game. And to me, that is demonstration of development and growth of the team overall. Any thoughts on that, Brad?
Well, I think you're exactly right. This is a young team. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to have some plays, but they're getting better. We saw obviously against Northwestern, they didn't make those plays down the stretch. They didn't find a way to win. Same thing against Tennessee. Now we're starting to see them maybe figure this out and understand. They made winning plays. And they're starting to figure out how to play and how to do things. And and maybe they won it this game at the end. They got a couple stops down the stretch. Maybe it's you make some free throws. Maybe it's a guy hits a big three. Obviously, that wasn't it today because they didn't make many of those. But they're finding ways to win, and they're showing some mental toughness. The other thing I thought was interesting is that it's not always the same guy, right? I mean, whether it was Rickhouse or White or, we know KJ, we know Ivasic, we know Boswell. But those other guys, maybe it's Draven Gibbs-Lahorn. Maybe it's Jake Davis. Jake Davis didn't have as good a game today. But I thought Draven Gibbs-Lahorn was fantastic. I mean, he did a great job. Dude can get to the basket, especially when he gets the right matchup. He can just drive and get by his guy. And, Merez Johnson, I didn't think had a great game, but he still rebounded. He still did those little things that you have to do. So they're figuring it out. They're just not quite a finished product yet. And so you're going to have ups and downs. And as we go through this season, there's going to be some highs, there's going to be some lows, but at the end of the day, they're a team that, in my opinion, really has a high ceiling.
Mike, what are they? 11-3, I believe, right now. 10-3. So
11-3.
11-3. Your question is, yeah. I mean, they're growing up. They're starting to figure out their roles. Brad Underwood mentioned that in his last press conference. The press conference when they defeated Oregon. They're starting to figure out who does what, where people like the basketball. Who's going to be there, and it's timing. For an example, there was a pass, a late game situation where KJ went to the basket, had a wide open layup, kind of, or maybe it was contested. Then he threw a pass to Kylan Boswell, and it was kind of like an alley-oop. So it's a timing thing. So now they're starting to figure it out. And the one thing with him that I think with the team is that now you better keep your hands up the whole time, no matter who you are, because he made some great passes, full court passes, the one to Merez Johnson, which I thought was great. So, I mean, I think they're figuring out, and they're a lot better defensively. Brad Underwood mentioned to us at the press conference at the beginning of the year that they couldn't guard a junior high team. You guys know I'm not into all this analytical stuff and numbers, but I'm going to tell you the eye test for me, they guard. And the one guy who's gotten a hell of a lot better guarding is Casperas. He really takes pride in guarding the basketball. You don't see guys beat him off the dribble. And the thing that I love, and the people out there listening, trash talking is a part of the game. And everybody knows that this kid's a lottery pick, and he has to bring his best every game. People give him different looks. If you look back at the game, his neck had a bunch of scratches on it that didn't happen the last game. They're really physical with him, and he doesn't back down. I like the fact that he's a gamer.
Yeah, I think that's good, and I do think they really didn't look rattled down the stretch. Even when things weren't going their way, there was a calm, I think, that this team has that shows that they are developing and they are getting better. And I do think too, the fact of the matter is you have Casperas with 3 turnovers, and we talked a lot about the difference between a 6 or a 7 turnover game and a 3 turnover game. You give Washington 4 more possessions with that crazy shooting. That might be all they need to slip past you and get that that upset victory. Now Illinois comes back, and they are looking at Penn State, a team that, boy oh boy, the coaching staff will be motivated to beat. There's no doubt. One of the things that I think is that was talked about by one of the folks here on YouTube, Patrick Quinn, our engineer for IlliniGuys Sports Spectacular, our weekly 2-hour radio show on Fridays and Saturdays throughout the state of Illinois. Trey White has really he's went from a guy that we were saying, well, what can he do? What is his identity going to be? All of a sudden now I hate to say it, but he's reminding me of, he's like Scottie Pippen, the guy that nobody really thinks that much of, who at the end of the game, he's got another 20 points or, another 17 points. Brad, this development of Trey White, where you add him to the mix, and this makes this team really tough.
Well, Trey White's different than the other guys. He was 0 of 4 from 3 today, but what he did was he gets in the paint, he makes twos, he gets the basket, he can finish. He does sometimes make the layups harder than they have to be, even though he makes them. It's like he wants degree of difficulty points. No, but I do. He's been great. He's fantastic. He's guards. He doesn't. He had a couple turnovers early, just like all of them. They turned it over a little bit early, but down the stretch he did not. But he's finishing at the rim. He makes free throws. He rebounds. He defends. He's really just. I mean, I don't say this in the. I don't want to say this to be negative towards any other player, but he's a lot of what Illinois wanted Ty Rodgers to be, but he can also stretch the floor a little bit and shoot it. You know what I mean? So he's very similar as a player in some regards, but they do have to respect him from 3, so that keeps the spacing. So I think you see why Ty didn't really, why he didn't want to maybe, play this year and wanted to sit out, is because they're very similar in what they do offensively, except Trey can shoot it a little better. So that's the difference. But they can get to the rim, they get to the basket. So, yeah, I've been really impressed with Trey White. He's found his role. He's found what he does well, and he's doing it. And this is it's a key part of what they have, because he's the most athletic guy they have on the floor out of the starters. He's the best athlete among the 5 starters, and sometimes you got to have a guy who can just go up and get it, just find a way, and he's that guy out of the starting lineup.
Well, here's my thing with Trey White. For all the people out there who were overanalyzing him, when he committed to Illinois, a lot of people felt, and you know who you are, why do you want that kid? He came from a losing program. He's not that good. And when you watch the film, one game I remember him, I think he had 29 points when he played for Louisville against Clemson, who was a decent team in the ACC last year. So, and I will give kudos to Brad Underwood. We've all talked about, the analytics, and Brad likes threes and he's not a mid-range kind of guy. Kudos to Coach Underwood and the entire coaching staff, because what they have done, they've allowed him to blossom. He is the one guy who is killing the mid-range game. He is taking people off the dribble. He's pulling up from the free throw line. He's pulling up from the baseline. They have allowed him to be who he is, and it fits that team, because now you have shooters, you have slashers, you have a guy with mid-range game, you have a post-up game, you have guys that can defend. So I like what they've done, and Brad, that's a really, really good comparison between him and Ty Rodgers, because, and he does guard really, really well. It's so easy to talk about KJ and all the other stars because they're NBA guys and Will Riley. But you look at the numbers over this weekend, this West Coast trip, it was him. It was him.
Yeah, I really think he has look, he's a sneak attack out there. Again, another game, 17 points, 7 rebounds, and nobody's talking about him. I think he is rapidly turning into that, that everyday guy who gets the job done with, brings his lunch pail and nobody gives him a cheer or anything. He just does his work. Looking at the other side of things, Will Riley still trying to get untracked. I think he's got more talent, just incredible level and potential. I think Underwood's doing the right thing by trying to get him into situations where he can succeed. Any issues on how you see Will being handled, Brad?
No, there's not much you can do for guys, really struggling to make shots. I think there's going to come a game when the other thing that happens here as Will Riley's minutes go down a little bit and he doesn't get as many opportunities, he moves down that scouting report and he becomes less of a guy they focus on. And as that happens, he's going to have one of these games coming up where he gets a good matchup and he's going to have a big game and he's going to score 15 and we're going to be like, oh, Will Riley's back. Well, then he'll probably get beat up the next game and struggle. And it's just the way it is. This is what it is with the freshman. He's a really talented player, though. I think this is where you just got to let him play through it and find what he had. You saw them try some different things, though. With Boswell having 2 fouls, you saw them play Jake Davis and Ben Humbrickhouse together, which which is interesting because they were doing that because Will Riley was just so unproductive and also just turning it over, just wasn't just all those things, just wasn't himself. What they've asked Riley to do right now is don't worry about offense, play defense, rebound, do your thing, facilitate for everybody else. But it's just not what he's normally. It was always just score, right? Go make buckets, and that's why he's so coveted by people at the next level. But I think if he lets the other part of the game, and then we've seen this, we talked about this with Humrickhouse too, do the other things. And you saw Humrickhouse; he didn't shoot the ball better today, but suddenly everybody likes him because he grabbed some rebounds, right? So I honestly, I'm not sure he's playing any differently than he was before. Guys missed some tough shots. He blocked a few shots that they notice now and things like that. So I think this will happen. I think we just got to let it play out and let guys develop and grow. And there's also that freshman wall. I mean, it's tough. I mean, going through the practices and things like that, I don't think you appreciate it, how hard it is for these guys. It's a very difficult thing. Going through this, the physicality also of college basketball is prevalent. By the way, can I throw out another point real quick? Illinois, remember how Illinois was like first in the country in getting to the free throw line? In Big Ten play, they're 17th out of 18 teams that get into the free throw line. So, does that mean that somehow guys stopped fouling Illinois? Illinois stopped learning how to draw fouls? Or is Big Ten officiating terrible? You make the call.
Well, I'm going to comment. I'm going to comment about Will Riley first, and then I'll talk about my besties. So here's my thing. From a coaching standpoint, Brad, if I'm Will Riley's Coach Underwood, I will tell that kid, let the game come to you. Let the game. Don't get the basketball and try to create and go one-on-one. He can do that. He's obviously gifted enough to do that, but he is, in my opinion, forcing the issue. His shot's going to fall. Your comparison again with Ben Humrickhouse, who I thought was great today. I don't care. That game last Friday, Thursday against Oregon, he had a little extra bounce in his step. Once Will gets a couple baskets to go down, get it out of the framework of the offense, a couple baskets for layups, get to the free throw line. Because today, I mean, he didn't launch a bunch of shots. I don't think he forced anything today, like he typically does. He shot 3 times today. He was 1 for 3 and with 11 minutes, and his minutes will go up. But I know right now he's probably pressing. He's reading his press clippings. I mean, we can't lie and say he's not, because we know that he's an NBA potential player, and I think he's trying to do too much at this point. But the game will come to him. The situation with the officials, I'm for this podcast, I'm going to say I'm done trying to figure them out, because to me, it's like Marez Johnson is the Kofi Cockburn of Illinois basketball. It doesn't matter what he does, it's a foul. But then when Kasparovich dribbles the basketball, you can bump him, hand check him, hip check him. His neck, like I mentioned, is full of scratches. I don't understand, and I'm done trying to figure it out. It's pointless to me. Mike had a good analogy at the start of football season. Pay these guys so they don't have to run around and do 40 other different jobs to make ends meet. It's just not a good look. And I know, Brad, they're a good free throw shooting team, and you're right. How do you go? And in the non-conference, think about it, they were road games and you had different officials. So I don't think their game changed.
Well, and let's face it, one of the things that we're going to see is teams like Michigan State, Purdue, probably now Michigan, they're going to try to body up and knock the Illini players off their line, because A, they can do it, and B, if they don't, they're going to get cooked the way Oregon did. And so I think Illinois has to expect that these teams are going to try to muddy it up. And I don't know how Brad Underwood works the referees to say, hey, if we play real basketball, we're going to beat the crap out of these guys. And if you let them hold and grab and play WWE, it's going to be a lot closer. If that's what you want, I don't know what your line is. I don't know if he can quite go that hard, but somehow they've got to put some pressure on the refs. And I think, guys like, and I know at the NBA level, it's easier to do, but guys like Phil Jackson and Pat Riley used to aggressively do that. And I almost think that Brad Underwood's going to have to be doing, maybe not work in the media like that, but he's probably going to have to be in the ear of those referees during warmups to really go at him. The other thing I would do is I'd try to tell the Illini players, don't shoot, and then before you're done with the shooting motion, look over at the referee. I think you got to try to score a basket and keep playing basketball. But Brad, you think we're going to see now, as teams see how devastating they were against Oregon, that it's going to turn into some grabbing, clutching, tearing, knocking, and seeing what the refs are going to call?
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. The one thing about it is, though, you look at it's kind of funny how it plays out, though. I think you're going to see a team I think that's the way, some of the Maryland plays. That's the way Northwestern's going to play. That's the way Michigan State was going to play. But you've seen a little bit of transition. It's funny. Everybody has Duke as being the top team. I think Illinois may be a better flow against Duke because they don't play as physical as other teams. You might see Illinois, win that game. I think that'd be a fun game. I think they could win that game. But and Iowa's not very physical, but yeah, I think you're right. Those Michigan, Purdue, Michigan State teams are going to be that way. I think UCLA does that as well. But Minnesota will play that way as well. They will try and grab and hold and so forth. And Pikel's Rutgers teams have always done it, so that's nothing surprise there. How do they handle it? Well, I think the way they handle it is the way they did today, was to be, to be a little bit tougher in the second half. You saw them with ball. They were not ball tough. I know they had turnovers in the first half, but a lot of them were just literally guys took the ball from them. And you're going to make a bad pass. So all these things. But at the end of the day, you can't just let someone take the ball from you. I mean, you just can't have that. We used to call it ball toughness. Are you tough with the ball? You're not going to let anybody take that ball from you. And if you do that, you're not going to turn the ball over as much. You're not going to give up those pick twos, as Brad likes to call them. And then I think that's where you're going to see that they're going to have to do that to win those games. And will the fouls get called? I think they're going to have some games where they will. It depends on which crew you have and how they kind of feel. I do think that crews get caught up in the emotion of the game and the swing of the game. That's why it's one of the things. Sometimes it's so hard to win on the road because of that, because they get caught up with the fandom and all that stuff. I think that happened at Northwestern. So, and now at the end of the day, though, Illinois has a lot of talent. There's a lot of talent on this team, and this should be a lot of fun.
Brad, the officials do get caught up in the game. Here's how you notice that. If there's today, everybody was asleep when Illinois had a 17-point lead. But as soon as Washington made a run, for those out there listening, watch the officials. They automatically start looking at the coaches because they see if the coach wants a timeout. They know. They're not just calling the game. They're looking at the coaches because they think, oh, my gosh, the game's getting interesting. They're making a run. So then that's how you get those calls, those timeouts so quickly, because they're looking at it. One guy I want to give credit to because, I'm trying to be as honest as I possibly can. Kasparis was a walking turnover. That kid is taking care of the ball. He doesn't do it as much. He's figured it out. Every game he seems to amaze me. I just can't. It's been a long time since I've seen a kid with that kind of composure and just to get better. I mean, he's literally looking to get better and better each game, and that's a sign of coaching. It's a sign of dedication because, make no mistake, this kid's in the gym. I don't know. They had a loss. I think it was the Tennessee loss at 2:00 in the morning, which I mentioned he was in the gym working on to get better. So this group has started to figure out how to take care of the ball, what they need to do. And one guy, I know, Mike, I don't want to steal your thunder because I know you're the host here, but damn, Draven Gibbs Longhorn is just giving Illinois a different look right now. I mean, he just looks amazing to me right now. His confidence level, and he guarded really well today. And it was nice because it was really nice to see that Coach Brad Underwood put him in the game when it mattered to try to guard Davis. That tells you what kind of athlete that he is. And that stems back to last year in the postseason run, the Big Ten tournament, NCAA tournament. Brad has trust in him that he can guard.
Yeah, no, I wanted to address, I thought there was one note here I thought that was really good. First off, this one is depressing because, I was going to Illini games before this guy was born. So Joseph, don't rub it in. But he did have a really good one. Will Illinois go to the Sweet 16, Elite 8, make a deep run? I'm going to go first on this because if you go to the Illini Guys front page, you can find my heat checks and Hail Marys where I do 3 predictions today. And one of my 3 predictions is I think this Illinois team is an Elite 8 team. And I think based on the right matchups, they could very well go to the Final Four and potentially win it all. Now, I also talked to Ant Wright, who does a ton of stuff on looking at basketball and breaking down film. You can find him at It's Ant Wright on Twitter and his YouTube page. He'll be on my Heat Checks and Hail Marys podcast tomorrow night. You can hear what he thought of that. But, Brad, I think this team is fully capable of an Elite 8 run, and I think they could do better depending on how things work out. Where do you have this team pegged right now? I'm not saying there's not going to be bumps along the way. I'm not saying that they're going to have they're not going to have rough nights, but I think this team, if it develops at the pace it's going right now, could be a really tough out come April.
Yeah, and we've talked about this, the way the game's officiated in the NCAA tournament, where it's a little bit more free-flowing and, they want to see it be less physical. I think that really fits Illinois. I think they're hard to stop when the game's like that. So I agree. I think they're going to be, if things play out. Right now, if you look at the new, brackets, I've seen them as a 2 or 3 seed right now. That's a great place to be if you want to get to the Sweet 16. 2s and 3s. 1s, 2s, and 3s have a great advantage getting to the Sweet 16.
Why is that, Brad? For those people who are more casual observers.
Well, if you look at who you're playing in the second round, you're not playing. So if you're a 2, you're going to play somebody who is a 7, which means they are like just outside maybe the top 25 teams. If you're a 1, you're going to play an 8. If you're going to play a 6, you're going to play a team ranked 20, 25. You're not going to get into the teams that are seeded to be in the top 16 until you get to the Elite 8. That's a huge advantage. Now, there's going to be upsets too. That happens as well. So you don't know about that, but it's a great thing to be on that line. And you're not seeing, generally speaking, you don't want to be on the line where you're going to play a 1 seed before you get to the Elite 8. Illinois had that last year. Remember, they were a 3, but they got Iowa State, beat them, but then they had UConn. If they're in a different, outside of UConn or Purdue, if they're in any other region, they're in the Final Four. I think most people believe that. But they weren't, because they ran into UConn and they gave up like 5,000 points in a row. So it happens. But this is why it's great to have those matchups. Now, as we kind of go through, and you as the season plays out, they legitimately, that win over Oregon was so devastating. If they can win, if you look at KenPom and they project this out, Illinois is favored or projected to win. They have 17 games left. They're projected to go 14-3 in those 17 games on KenPom. One of those losses is Duke. So that would put them at 17-3 in the Big Ten if that played out that way. Okay, that'd be, I don't think it's going to happen. But I mean, that would be, you're probably a 1 seed if you go 17-3 in the second best conference in basketball right now. You go 15-5, you're probably going to be on that 2 line. I mean, that's literally how it plays out. If you beat Duke, you probably bump up a spot, right? So you could go from a 3 to a 2, a 2 to a 1. So they're in a great position to make a run here to get a great seed. And if they get a great seed, then that gives them a much easier path to get into that Sweet 16. And that we've talked about this how many years. Getting to the second weekend is the key to a program. Obviously, getting to Final Four is you want to get to a Final Four, win a national title. But getting to that second weekend consistently is what sets your program apart. That's why Tom Izzo has had such a great program at Michigan State. They just seem to find a way to get into that Sweet 16. And that's, whether it's some same thing happened at Duke, all these programs that separates them is they're consistently playing in the Sweet 16, and that's where you want to be.
Well, to me, it's Brad stole my thunder, so I'm not going to rehash
Sorry.
this. But no, you go right ahead. You want to roll. I was thinking of commenting, but you had so many good thoughts. I lost them, most of them. For me, it is the seeding. I think that's what it's going to boil down to. I think no matter what, I think they're at least a Sweet 16 team. To me, this year there are no UConns out there. Illinois proved that they could play with Tennessee. They lost to them by 2 points. I think if they played UConn today on a neutral, if they played Tennessee today on a neutral court, I think they probably will win that game. It's a different team right now, and I have to give Tennessee credit. They didn't play their best game either, and they had starters out. So could they advance to the Final Four? If they played the way they played against Oregon, they can play anybody. But you may not get that in the tournament. Team Scout won the tournament. The tension's higher in the tournament. Is it possible? Yes. And let's give this team some credit. They're the youngest team in the Big Ten, and we're talking about them winning the conference right now. And this was a team that people didn't have them ranked. Now, I'm really curious to see tomorrow, since they beat Oregon or they spanked Oregon, where they'll put them in the rankings. I still think sometimes nationally Illinois doesn't get the credit that they deserve. It's for some reason when you think of the Big Ten, they still want to talk about Michigan State and Wisconsin. But there was a statistic today that the three of us know, and the people who cover Illinois, and if you're a fan, the Big Ten runs in the last 4 or 5 years, it's gone through Purdue and Illinois. And for some reason, because they don't want to give Illinois credit, I don't know what that reason is, they don't give them I don't think they give them what they deserve. So tomorrow, based on what they did to Oregon, they went 2-0. There's no way this shouldn't be a top 15, top 12 team in the country, in my opinion. And, one more comment about the seeding. Imagine what if they could have beat Tennessee, what that would have done for them, because that would have been a win over another SEC school who is the best conference in basketball right now. I have to admit, even though the Big Ten has some really good wins in basketball, that would have that win would have held up large for Illinois in postseason. That's why I think the Duke game is really, really important, and I'm glad they're playing Duke now versus in December, because Illinois is a much better team now than what they were in the early part of December.
Yeah, those are all good points. One last thing, Joseph is a first-time watcher, so thanks for watching us. And folks, that does tell us that it's really good if you have somebody that is an Illini fan or a sports fan, or just wants to get away from politics and all the fighting. You know what? Share our episodes with that person. We would greatly appreciate it. If you're listening to it on a podcast, give us a 5-star rating on Apple, and maybe a couple sentences about why you like it. It would really help us a lot, and we would appreciate it. The podcast grows because you share it with friends or fellow fans, and we would love to do that. Here's an interesting question. Something that I went over with Ant Wright that we'll have on tomorrow night's podcast. But Brad and Ked, who are the top 3 or 4 Big Ten teams in your mind as of today?
Great question. You didn't prep us with these questions. We're not like
no, I don't. Nathan didn't send me a list ahead of time. He's just putting them. He's just putting them into YouTube or into X, and he's getting. We like to do two-way stuff.
No, I'm good.
Yeah.
I think I said that I thought there were maybe 7 teams that I thought could win the Big Ten. I still think Purdue's in the mix. I still think Michigan State, Michigan. I think Indiana has finally figured out when they play one big, because of injury to Renault, they're actually playing better because they can space the floor and they can do more things. So I think they're dangerous. I think Oregon is still good, but I think Illinois is my favorite. And so then I think you got Michigan, Michigan State, Purdue would be the tops. I just don't see the other teams being.
What about Wisconsin? They certainly are shooting well.
They are, but they're 1-2. I mean, they already lost 2 games in the conference. I think they are shooting well, at least one day. So we'll see how that goes. I mean, we'll see how they do. I mean, they've got a tough game at Rutgers tomorrow. I don't know if Dylan Harper's playing. Obviously, if he's playing, that's a different team than when he doesn't play. So they've got an opportunity, but they still have games at Michigan State. They still have a game against Illinois, at Purdue, which nobody wins at Purdue. At Maryland, another tough place, and at UCLA. They've got that. I think the other thing about it is I think we'll find out a little bit once these teams take that West Coast trip. I mean, because it is a grind to go cross country for a 4 or 5 day trip. This is not like going out there for one game and coming back. You stay out there. And although it sounds cool, it maybe isn't. And I think we'll see how these other teams also, how does like a UCLA or an Oregon handle going cross country and going to the Midwest, staying like 4 days to play Northwestern and Illinois back to back? If Illinois stayed 6 days, and I thought their legs looked a little iffy at the end of this game. I mean, they were a little short on things, didn't have the same bounce. So yeah, I do think that's going to be very, very interesting to see how that plays out. I think that may tell the tale here.
Well, in no particular order, my 4 teams are Oregon, Illinois, Michigan, and Michigan State. Not sold on Purdue like it was in the past because they don't have Wilt Chamberlain or Shaquille O'Neal or Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in the post like they've had in the past. The team out of those 4 teams, Michigan scares me. Michigan has gotten a lot better. You know, Wolf looks different. They are a different team. They're coached, they're coached better than what they have been in the past. If there was a team I think that could challenge for the conference title with Illinois, Oregon, and Michigan State, that would be the team I would want to play. And then I'd have to throw Michigan State in as the other scary team. They didn't look well to me early on in the season. Prior to them going out to Maui, they just looked different. But right now, they're starting to catch fire. They're making shots. They were a team that couldn't put it in the ocean early in the season. Now they're making shots, and they're going to defend. The thing I like about Illinois and Michigan and Michigan State, I think, and even Purdue, I guess, and Oregon, if you get them the right seed in the tournament, because those teams, to me, play the way the SEC schools play. Tip my hat to the SEC because those teams can get out and run. They can play physical basketball, but they can also play finesse. They are good enough to get out and compete and run. Obviously, we know Illinois is because we've covered them. You watch Oregon beat Alabama. Illinois played well against Alabama. That's why Brad Underwood put this team together, because he saw what UConn did. The days of grinding it out in the Big Ten, which I've said about 6 podcasts ago, it's ugly. Not a fan of it. I enjoyed it last Thursday, but those teams really have a legitimate shot, because they're up and they run and they play basketball the way it's supposed to be played.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities here for teams to stub their toe. And I think Illinois is going to have their challenges because of the refereeing style and because of the physicality of some of these things. Doesn't mean, though, that I think this team doesn't have opportunities to excel in the postseason. I think they're going to earn some stripes and they're going to develop. Real quick, Justin says he never missed a basketball podcast. We certainly appreciate you listening or watching. And we'd also tell you to give a shot at our football stuff. We're pretty proud of the coverage we had. I thought with, obviously Kev, Brad, and myself, but with Matt Stevens as well, we gave really good coverage of, for example, just the South Carolina game and how Brett Bielema seems to be a boogeyman now, and he's assailing the mental health of South Carolinians across the state. Because they're still mad. If you go on to Twitter today, they are still upset. So Brett Bielema.
Hey, did you see the story that the guy had on our website where he was in Vegas and a South Carolina fan walked by, he was playing, he said, "Your coach is an ass," or something like that. And he said, "Well, your coach is," and he said, "Well, I'm not on the team. I don't play anywhere." And he said he got up and walked away and made the T signal as he left the table.
I'll tell you what's really funny. If you guys want to do something really funny after you're done listening to this lovely podcast, go to Google and subscribe South Carolina message boards and football, and just sit back, get you some water, a glass of tea. It is priceless. They are still talking about Brett Bielema. They're still talking about how bad how bad the Illinois football team is. Those comments are it's well worth it. I guarantee it. You'll wake up or you'll get on Twitter tomorrow and you'll rehash it, because I literally look at all those and it's just, I can't believe how mad they are. I guess the big thing is they don't consider Illinois, and I kind of understand it, a Big Ten football school. It's all about Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State, and now Oregon. So they can't believe that they lost to an elementary school team from the Big Ten. So when you read those comments from the message boards, you can go on Twitter, but the message boards are it's well worth it. I would never lie to you and let you down.
Well, I will tell you the other thing is that my response back to a South Carolina fan would be, well, you know what? We expected to beat you because you're not Georgia, LSU, Alabama, or Florida. So ha, ha, ha. But I actually thought it was the battle of two teams that had a very similar past, two teams that have broke through a little bit but haven't been able to maintain it. And we're going to bridge over a little bit into football now. But I got to be honest with you. Next year, one of my predictions, I think Illinois is going to win either 10 or 11 games next year. Now, I will say that's a loaded prediction, but you know me, I have a tendency to predict stuff. That's a loaded prediction because the rest of the Big Ten is going to get better. But I think Brett Bielema, Brad kind of broke the story about how the NIL funds had been met, the goals had been met and now exceeded. We're seeing Brett Bielema make moves where he's able to address holes in the roster. But what I think is so important about Brett Bielema that separates him from most of the coaches out there is the man knows how to identify talent. And like Bill Belichick, he knows how to identify talent that is necessary to play in the systems that he uses. And I think when he can go pick a guy here and a guy there to help close gaps in recruiting, I think that's a place that Brett Bielema is very comfortable competing with other people because he knows he doesn't have to get one of the top 5 ranked guys in the portal. He has to get a guy who he is confident can play the role that he needs for the Illini. Brad?
Well, I think you're spot on. I think Brett Bielema does a really good job of using what he has and to make it and to win with it. And he understands what he has to do. He also has a plan. I think that the recruiting good players is a part of it, but those players have to also fit together. And that's what Brett Bielema does a fantastic job. And I will say this Illinois team in basketball too is the same way. Brad Underwood's put a team that fits really well together. He's got 2 guards who can play. He's got he's got guys who can shoot. He's spaced the floor. He's got 7. He always said last year the problem, they had to play Coleman at the 5 so they could get the spacing because, they had one guy on the floor who couldn't shoot and he was a smaller guy. So now what you have now is you have maybe a better mix. You can put a guy in, Marez Johnson. You can put a guy in who's maybe not a great shooter, but you have 4 other guys all the time on the floor. And this team really, they handle the ball. They've got guys who can create, and you see them make adaptations. That's what Bielema did. They went from running the ball primarily the first couple of years to throwing the ball on 50% of the downs the last 2 seasons. Now, some of that you've got the quarterback play obviously was pretty good, but yeah, and you don't have Chase Brown, so that makes sense. You want to give him the ball more, but yeah, these guys adapt. Good coaches adapt. They change. They don't do things the exact same way.
And Brett Bielema has not done that. He's done a really, really good job of putting Illinois on the map. I know it's kind of funny, that we're sitting here laughing about it, and I think it's kind of funny too. And I'm not going to get into the NIL situation, but I do want to make this comment. One of my friends who's a lawyer made a comment to me about if you had 1,000 Illinois fans, 1,500, 2,000 fans, and each one of those donated $5,000 to the NIL money, you'd be surprised what that can do. I mean, for just an NIL, regardless of football, basketball program. I'm not trying to promote them, but my point is they've done, like Brad mentioned, they've done a really good job with NIL funds, and $5 seems like a lot, but it really isn't. And I know darn well there's more than 500,000 Illinois fans out, 500 Illinois fans out there. So they need, they need the help. They've done well with it. You can see the success. And I've said this from day one, and I'm not going to renege on this. I think the reason why the Illinois football program, along with the coaches, and coaches, I'm going to give you credit for this. I think the reason that they're able to compete is because of NIL and the transfer portal. The transfer portal has benefited Illinois football more than any program, I think, down there, because Illinois was always behind the 8 ball. They were always behind. It didn't matter. They've had some good coaches down there. They just couldn't sustain it. Now you have a great coach. Now you have the transfer portal working in your favor, and you do have the NIL package. So I think that's huge. And I think that gives Illinois a fighting chance to go out there and compete, regardless of who it's against, and even the women's program, because I know they need that because they're hurting, because they're down injuries right now. But anyway, point being, it's a good situation right now for the whole University of Illinois athletic program because they're competing. The recruiting is fun. I mean, for people who like recruiting and on our message boards, I mean, that's what we do. We talk a lot of recruiting, we talk other things, but it's a good time to be an Illini fan right now.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to take a look, and part of the reason why I thought 10 or 11 games is possible is they do have a schedule. There's no easy schedule in the Big Ten, but they do have home games against Western Illinois, Western Michigan, USC, some team called Ohio State, Rutgers, Maryland, and then our friends in Northwestern, but that'll be at home. And then on the road, Illinois plays Duke, who will have a new quarterback. They play Indiana, which I think is finally going to be a classic game. I mean, when has that game ever meant anything? Because they've not both been good at the same time. Play Purdue, and then they're on the road at Washington and Wisconsin. So I'm not saying it's an easy schedule, but I am saying that it's a schedule that's manageable. And I think the Fighting Illini, if they get to 10 games and go 10-2, they will have to be looked at for a CFP berth. I'm not saying they will get one. I'm saying they will have to be looked at. If Illinois goes 11-1, I think they're in the CFP. And we saw, back in 2022, with a little bit of luck, Illinois might have been able to squeeze their way into a playoff. Unfortunately, they lost a few games down the stretch, and Brett Bielema didn't lose those type of games this year. I think we saw that improvement that the team and the coaching staff, everybody, the whole organization needed to learn how to win. And now you're looking at 10-3 and finishing on a incredible note at the end of the year with a Citrus Bowl victory. I really do think this team is primed and will have an opportunity to have quite a year next year.
Yeah, I think that it sets up well for them. You got to go out and do it, but
Right.
It does set up well for them, and I think that's where Illinois wants to be. I mean, just to be talking about this is pretty wild when you think about where this program was 4 years ago, and now you're talking about a team that I think legitimately could be a top 15 team. I think there's going to be, they've added. What they've done in the portal is also added pieces, but also retained guys. Getting J.C. Davis back on the offensive line, and the other guys, Xavier Scott coming back in the defensive back. We'll see what Gabe Akers decides, but getting these guys back is just like signing those guys in the portal. They would be great in the portal. Those guys would be huge commodities, but they've also added pieces, and so this is what they've been able to do. This is what the portal does for them. And they've been selective in the portal, but I mean, I'm sitting here right now. I love the wide receivers they have in the room. I like their offensive line. I think they're going to add another offensive lineman coming up at some point. I think they could use their defensive lineman or two. I think, and then I think they need a punter. A punter might be the biggest need right now after what I watched in the bowl game. So, getting a good punter would be huge. And so, there's no question this program is on the rise, and they've got a great opportunity ahead of them.
Well, Mike and Brad, if you think about it, you talk about the college playoff. What would have happened if they would have beat Minnesota? If you wouldn't have lost at home to Minnesota, they were teetering around the 18th, 19th mark, I think, in the rankings. So, I mean, I think that Minnesota loss was a dagger for this year. I mean, as far as the college playoffs hopes, I mean, it probably wouldn't have happened, but I know they were close to doing that. From the transfer portal part, here's what I like about what Brett Bielema does. He's just going out to fit needs. And he is right, Brett. He's retaining guys that could go elsewhere and probably start. And I don't blame those guys for wanting to look, but obviously he's done a good job of getting those kids to come back, and in my personal opinion, Scott and Davis. I mean, those are two big guys, like you mentioned, to get to come back. But when I mentioned the fact that they're just finding guys who are difference makers. One, that Illinois is always about depth. in college football, you have to have depth. Actually, in college athletics, I mean, I mentioned that with the women's program right now. They're missing 2 starters, well, possibly 3 with Letty and, now Makira Cook and Gretchen Dolan. I mean, think if you had the depth, it's a different outcome, probably for their season right now, even though it's too early. The football program, you can't afford to be down a right guard or a tight end or a quarterback. I mean, you have to go out to get guys that when you go get them to give yourself a chance. I mean, which is why they went out and they got Ethan Hampton, the kid from NIU. He's a proven guy at the Division I level, and that if something does happen to Luke and he's injured, you don't miss a beat. Kind of same thing with John Paddock last year when Luke got hurt at Minnesota. So that's what I like, and they're getting guys who know what their roles are going to be when they get to Illinois. And the one thing I can tell you from talking to all these recruits, those coaches, they don't lie to kids. They're upfront and they're honest with them. That's why their recruiting is doing better. And they're going to eventually start getting some of these fans like to call them 4- and 5-star kids. But I wrote an article for IlliniGuys, hopefully be published in the next day or two, about Brett Bielema's philosophy about recruiting. And it may have went over a lot of people's head because he talked about how he has kind of set the standard for some teams to kind of look what Illinois is doing, and they're using that method. So, and which means that they're doing really good with the eye test.
Yeah, I will say the other thing is that Ked brought up the CFP. I think we're running into maybe one of the great sports weekends of the year. You're looking at a Thursday night game with Penn State and Notre Dame on at 6:30 Central Time on ESPN. Then Friday night at 6:30, you get Texas and Ohio State. And then to make it even better, and I'm not even talking about college basketball because we know there's some games there, but then you're getting on Saturday, you're getting the Chargers going to play Houston at 4:30 in the afternoon, 3:30 in the afternoon. And then at 7:00, we get Pittsburgh and Baltimore. And then you turn around on Sunday and we get a triple header with Denver at Buffalo at noon, Green Bay at Philadelphia at 3:30, and then Washington at Tampa Bay at 7. And you finish up as if we needed more, but you finish up with Minnesota or Detroit at the Rams. So, I mean, you're looking at quite a weekend of fun for sports fans. I'm pretty excited about this whole thing. I don't know how you guys feel, but this is one of the great sports weekends on the calendar.
Well, yes. I mean, I don't know what more you can ask for. I mean, Mike, we've been talking about our whole life revolves around the sporting events, right? I mean, it's just what we do, right? So, no, it's fantastic. You've got everything going on outside of playoff baseball we get in October. That's the only thing we're missing right now. Some indoor and the golf league starts, right? The indoor golf league, right? That should be entertaining. So we got a lot of things going on. Should be a blast. I'm excited to watch some. I'm very hyped for 2025.
Who do you think's going to win? Who's your CFP predictions for these two games, Brad?
I just think if we've talked about this in private, can Ohio State continue to play this way? I think they're the best team if they continue to play this way. But the thing about this is I don't know they even have to play as well as they played to win. I think they're better than everybody else that's out there. So I'm going to go with Ohio State, and I'm going to go with I may have picked Penn State on another one, so I'm going to pick Notre Dame here because that's the game I think's really Notre Dame just surprises me. I think they've got a mobile quarterback that can help them, but I think it's Notre Dame, Ohio State. I think Ohio State wins it all. I'm a big fan of the way Marcus Freeman coaches. I think he does a great job, and so I think he'll keep them in there. I'm not as big a fan of James Franklin, although I think he has maybe a more talent than Notre Dame has. But yeah, so that's my pick.
Well, I think Ohio State's going to win it all, and I would love to see Penn State win. I think they're a better team, But I think the officials, wink, 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 or the CFP, NCAA, whatever you want to call it, the mafia, they're not going to have two Big Ten teams in the championship. It's not going to happen. So I'm sorry, Penn State fans. I'd love to see you win. I just don't see that happening, even though I think it would be great to see them play. I think Penn State has played really, really well this whole college playoff season. I'm encouraged by them, but it'd be really, really nice to see them get it done. But Ohio State, that Michigan loss was different. They're fighting. They're showing the rest of the country what recruiting can do for you.
Yeah, and I'm actually thinking that I think that Penn State Notre Dame game is going to be a classic defensive battle. I think the Penn State defensive line and offensive line is about this much better than Notre Dame, and I think it's going to be a close game, but I think Penn State's going to eke by the skin of their teeth. And then I think Ohio State, I think they're going to have to withstand an early surge by Texas. But Texas reminds me of a cat. They get the mouse and they mess around with it, and then they start playing with it instead of killing it. And I think if you do that, if they get an early start against Ohio State, you better slam the door shut. I think Ohio State's going to come back and take them. And if Texas doesn't start, excuse me, if Texas doesn't start fast, I think they could be in a whole world of trouble against that Ohio State team. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I am looking forward to that, of course. And then tomorrow night, we get the debut of the WWE on Netflix. They're doing Raw on Netflix. So now they're going to make their play at trying to get some worldwide audience as opposed to just the U.S. market. So that should be entertaining as well. Now I'm seeing one comment, and Brad and I had the good fortune to interview Gabe over the course of last season. Probably 10, 12 times, Brad. I'm going to tell you that I didn't see a lot of big ego out of Gabe. So I'm not certain that if he thinks he's better than he is or not, but I didn't see any evidence of that. Gabe has a lot of potential, but Brad, I don't know what your thought is on that, but I just wanted to kind of throw that out there to elicit what you think. And of course, Ked has a different angle because he talks to a lot of the players as their recruits and then has a relationship with them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many radio shows Gabe was on with us, 20, 30 times. I don't even know. It's a lot, right? You know,
yeah.
I never got the impression. I mean, I think he's a confident kid. I think he wants to play. I think he expects playing the NFL. I do think the one thing to remember about him is he might be better set up as in a 4-3 as a rush end, as opposed to a 3-4 where he's a linebacker. And I know that's not what he played at Illinois because he didn't want to. I know, but in the NFL they tell you where you play. Right. I mean, it's a different animal, especially when you're starting out. So I think that there could be he may fit better in the right system. So I think he can play in the NFL. I think he's going to be a late round pick. And so, yeah, so we'll see. I don't know. I've never gotten the impression of that from Gabe, though.
I don't think so. With the mic really quick, I don't think that, but I do know he started off the season really slow. People were really frustrated with him, at the beginning of the season because he was nowhere to be found. And I, once again agree with Brad. Just think the difference in schemes may be better for him. I mean, I certainly don't think he's a bust, but as an athlete, here's a rule of thumb that you never see publicly. They bet on themselves. I mean, that's what Io did. If you remember when he went to the NBA and people telling him not to go, these kids bet on themselves, and Gabe's no different. I mean, he's a confident kid. If you're not going to be confident and think you're the best, don't play football, don't play sports, because that's what you have to be. You have to know that you're going to go out there and you're going to be the best. Now, you also have to be able to back that up. You don't want to go out there. The one thing that frustrates me, is watch a team that's down, and let's say it's basketball, 25-4, and then you make a 3, and then you give this, then you show the ice water in your veins. Run your ass back down the court because you're down by 21 points.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you. we are coming close here to the time limit, so we want to kind of give people their evening. But of course, Illinois plays on Wednesday night at 8 p.m. at home against Penn State. We will be doing the halftime live show, and then we will be figuring out a way to get after game interviews or live shows out there. Gets a little challenging because if when you're there covering the game, you don't know exactly when the coaches and players are going to come in for interviews and how long they're going to stay. So it gets a little bit crazy trying to time it up where we're not on the air for an hour and a half and people are bored as we're waiting for Brad to get out of that coverage, or Ked, depending on the night. But we will figure something out for that. And of course, next Saturday at 11 p.m., USC comes in, and Illinois has an opportunity to really set the table for a huge game at Indiana if they can win those two, because that next week they'll play at Indiana on Tuesday and at Michigan State on Sunday. And those will be two wars, because those teams will be motivated to try to knock the Illini down because they expect they can win the Big Ten title. Brad, give us a summary, and then we'll have Ked give us a summary, and then we'll pop out of here. And thanks to everybody for listening.
Well, I'm sitting here in Snowmageddon here with I think we've gotten around 8 inches of snow right now in Illinois. So I will tell you this. What a fantastic 2 weeks for the Illini athletic programs. The win over Missouri, starting with that one, you beat Missouri, you take your Christmas break, eat your good ham, turkey, whatever you have, or in my case, steak. And then you beat Chicago State. You go on the road, you beat a top 10 Oregon by 5 million. You win the Citrus Bowl, and then you win another road game in the Big Ten against Washington. I don't know that you can ask for a better about 14 days. Women's basketball was maybe the slight issue but they've got so many injuries. It's hard to bag on them. I mean, they're in a tough spot. They've got a lot of young players having to play and people playing out of position. But yeah, great start to 2025. This Illini team could be special. Let's see how they progress.
I'll end with this. This group of athletics at University of Illinois, spearheaded with Josh Whitman, who I think hired great staff. I'm not going to go through all the coaches because I know golf and volleyball, even though he didn't hire those coaches, volleyball, about golf. But my point is, Illinois is in a good place right now. And I know fans are used to bad things happening and finding a way where things just go wrong for Illinois. I've not seen that. Brett Bielema has put the football program in a situation where they have a chance to win, and one interception doesn't cost you a game, and if it does, it's part of sports. Brad Underwood has done that. Shauna Green has done that. This is a time where you can just sit back and enjoy. And if you're one of those fans who like to trash talk your other fans on social media or Facebook or Twitter, and so be it. I don't do that anymore because I know at some point your team, if the team you root for loses, it's going to come back to bite you in the butt. But having said that, you're just used to bad things happening to them. This is a good time. And I go back to that win last Thursday against Oregon. That was something special, and we all got to witness it. Records being broken, and you're seeing this done by a young team. And the season goes by a lot faster than what you guys think. I mean, right now, with what Brad mentioned, there's 17 games left. You're playing 2 or 3 games a week. Season's going to be over. So, yes, there'll be some bumps in the road, but just enjoy it. And I wrote an article today about Kev Sparris, enjoying him while he's here, because pretty soon he's going to be gone.
Yep, that's a great way to kind of end this, folks. If you've enjoyed what you've seen here, I would tell you, take a look at the scroll at the bottom. If you don't follow all of us, follow me at Mike Kegley, Brad at Sturdy32, Ked at KedPrince4, at Illini_guys, at Matthew C. Stevens. Follow us on Twitter. It keeps you informed there. If you are looking on the YouTube channel, you want to go look for our YouTube channel, IlliniGuys.com is what you would want to subscribe to, so you don't have to try to wait for these. They'll come to you automatically. And with our podcast, you can subscribe at pretty much any distributor and get our podcast, which would be great to see you do that. Also, if you have the opportunity, IlliniGuys.com, only $99 a year. And the great part about that is you got the message boards where you can communicate with Ked, Brad, Matt, Larry, myself 24/7. And when we talk about, rumors and stuff, we don't put them on here. That we put the rumors on there for the paying subscribers, try to keep people ahead of the news. That's a benefit, and we would love to have more people in that community. Our message boards are full of people who are talking about Illini sports, arguing about Illini sports, and even talking about other sports in between. So we would love to have more people be a part of that. Only 27 cents a day. Please go to IlliniGuys.com and go ahead and register. You get 6 days to kick the tires around. And then on the 7th day, you're able to get your credit card charged. And we would enjoy having you as a member. Folks, until we see you again on Wednesday night, go Illini.